Hi everybody, welcome to the True Crime Nurse. My name is Kat and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Today is going to be one of the most shocking cases I will probably ever discuss on this channel. This man is the most notorious, prolific serial killer in the United Kingdom's history, also known as Dr. Death. He went on a murdering spree of at least 215 people and likely many, many more. In case you haven't already guessed it, we are going to be talking about none other than the awful Dr. Harold Shipman. Just wait until you guys hear how this story ends. You are definitely going to want to stick it out for the end of this one. All right, friends. We're going to get this case started using our typical nursing SBAR format, so be sure to check out my prior videos if you don't know what that means. And don't forget to like the video if you like it, subscribe, and comment down below any case suggestions that you have. Hyde, in Greater Manchester, UK, is where today's story takes place. It's known for its rich history, small-town living, and the uprise of cotton mills during the Industrial Revolution. Many members of its community describe it as a quaint place, with only about 30,000 people residing there during the early 2000s. This peaceful town was disrupted by a monster lurking in the shadows, disguised as help in a white lab coat, Dr. Death, also known as Dr. Harold Shipman. On June 24, 1998, two concerned friends arrived at the door of Kathleen Grundy's home, and they were devastated by what they discovered. Kathleen had made plans that day with two of her friends to go to the local lunch club in the afternoon. When Kathleen didn't show up, her friends were concerned and they decided to swing by her place just to make sure she was okay because this was really unlike her. When they got there, the door was closed but unlocked, so Kathleen's friends walked in, shouting her name to see if she was even home. Heartbreakingly, they found her dressed, sitting in her chair, and unresponsive. She was also not breathing. There didn't appear to be any disturbances in the house. Nothing valuable seemed to have been taken, and there were no injuries that they could visibly see on her, so what happened here? After calling for help, Kathleen was pronounced dead. Dr. Shipman, her general practitioner or GP, was supposed to have come over earlier that day to draw her lab work, but later we come to find that he hid his true intentions for that visit beneath the guise of his credentials, and obviously they were sinister. He acted like he was simply coming over to take some blood work and assess her labs, but instead he gave her a lethal dose of morphine by injection. According to all that knew her, Kathleen was vivacious and an active part of her community. Her daughter Angela and her son-in-law Phil described her as extremely fit and remarkably energetic, so this made no sense to them whatsoever. Dr. Shipman was so loved by Kathleen that she actually told her sister-in-law and family about him and encouraged everyone that she knew to go see him. Angela was notified at work of her mother's passing and immediately felt something was off, and she needed answers, so Phil and Angela went to Dr. Shipman's office to go talk to him. Although Angela passed away in 2018, she was an attorney, so she had a strong gut instinct when it came to something nefarious, and she felt that something was going on. Dr. Shipman said that Kathleen was not well during their appointment, that she was frail and died of old age, but he said it in a very cold, emotionally disconnected manner. The official cause of death per Dr. Shipman's documentation in the death certificate for Kathleen was natural causes or old age. He also mentioned that she may have been addicted to morphine, and this was backdated in an addendum that he added after she died. Very strange, guys. His demeanor really seemed to contradict the way that Kathleen had described him to everyone in her life. Sweet elderly people love when they have a good doctor. At least that's what I've personally seen within my own family. So I found this to be really sad that she raved about him, and we know what he did to her and many others. Shipman had already completed Kathleen's death certificate, and it was clear to Angela that he did not want her to have an autopsy because he said everything that he could to persuade Angela out of a burial. I wonder why. 3 weeks later, during the process of going over her mother's wishes and her last will and testament, Angela and Phil found something very peculiar. The will had been changed, and it had been changed very recently. It was typed on a typewriter, which, spoiler alert, Kathleen did not have one of those. The family said that she enjoyed writing everything out by hand and had the most beautiful penmanship, so this stood out to them. The typed will was not at all in her writing style, and none of it made sense to the family. In fact, it appeared hurried and completely omitted her daughter Angela and her son-in-law Phil. Suddenly, everything went to none other than Dr. Harold Shipman. It was noted that this new will stated Kathleen's wish was to be cremated, but Angela disregarded that, and thank God she did. Kathleen's 385,000-pound estate and everything else that she owned was no longer going to family. For reference, 385,000 pounds would have been a little over $500,000 US at that time, and today that would be close to $1 million. Angela was devastated. She said to Phil, he can have it, to cope with that feeling of betrayal, but Phil insisted that they needed to dig deeper because this didn't make any sense. I'm so glad that he persisted on that. Kathleen's family compared her signature on the back of her driver's license, and it did not appear to match the signature on this new will. Strange, right? In case you didn't know, when you complete a will, you require witnesses because it's a legally binding document that speaks to your final wishes regarding end-of-life preparation and care and all things financial. Angela then proceeded to contact the witnesses who verified this new document, and the witnesses stated that it wasn't their signature. Both witnesses stated that they hadn't even worked with Dr. Harold Shipman. At this point, Angela and Phil realized that they needed to involve the police. Angela contacted a criminal attorney and colleague, or as they call them in the UK, solicitors, and she was connected to their police department point of contact. Forensic scientists found that both the will and the letter accompanying it were forgeries. These deeply concerning findings were linked back to Harold Shipman, who had fingerprints left on the back of the letter and the typewriter itself. These documents were created on that portable typewriter that we already kind of touched on, which was seized from his practice. It was positively found that this was the source of the will and the letter. Any guesses as to what Dr. Shipman's excuse was to justify that odd coincidence? He stated that Kathleen asked to borrow the typewriter. What a nice doctor! Wrong. I personally don't know any physicians that lend out their personal, expensive equipment. For anyone here that is in the medical field, do you know of any? All that I've had happen is that most of the doctors take my pens and stethoscope, never the other way around, not one time. Detectives decided that it was time, with the family's permission, of course, to exhume Kathleen's body, and thankfully they did, because this was the key that unlocked the entire Pandora's box. August 1st of 1998, Kathleen Grundy was exhumed. I cannot imagine how painful this must have been for the family to be grieving and to have to bring your loved one out of their rest so freshly, especially in these circumstances. Investigators were shocked at what they discovered. Morphine was found in high levels in Kathleen's system, and she was not on that medication previously, despite his claim. These levels were consistent with overdosing within just 3 hours of her time of death, which fell perfectly within that time window of the house call that Dr. Harold Shipman provided to her. Again, Dr. Shipman forged in that will to have her cremated, and Angela ignored it. Had she obliged, he probably wouldn't have been arrested. A warrant was signed to raid this sad excuse of a doctor's home and office, and what they found was disturbing, to say the least. The investigators discovered women's jewelry and thousands of patient charts detailing many concerning cases that appeared eerily similar to Kathleen's. Obviously, now this wouldn't really happen because most electronic records are kept electronically. I should say charts are kept electronically, but paper charts during this time, especially being in the home of the provider, was normal. Shipman, to this point, had seen over 3,000 patients and been in practice for over 25 years. So thousands of people were unknowingly in the presence of evil, and he kept record. Upon cross-checking the charts that existed with Dr. Shipman's computer, it was clear that he modified notes right after the visits, making addendums to earlier times that would cover up why he was there. Sometimes he also altered them to make the medical histories match and explain away their loss of life. Transaction logins on his computer showed backdating cancer diagnoses, heart attacks, and many other conditions that people did not even have. A warrant was out for Harold's arrest, so Shipman came to the station with his solicitor by his side rather than waiting for the police to come to him. To me, this was a power play and a sign that he felt confident walking into that police station. On September 7th, 1998, Dr. Harold Shipman was officially arrested for Kathleen Grundy's murder. As word spread, so did the panic in Hyde. The community and families all felt hurt and violated, and anyone that was in his care wondered if their loved ones were victims too. Many families chose to exhume their loved ones, and the police ordered 9 additional people to be exhumed shortly after Kathleen was found to be murdered and had not died from natural causes, as he stated. These subsequent tests on the additional 9 former patients provided the same results along with the medical records. None were suffering from terminal illnesses, and all their lives were stolen by a man that was supposed to heal them. When confronted with these findings and the electronic findings, Harold asked if the police could step out of the room for a moment. When the investigators obliged, he fell to his knees, sobbing in the interview because he ran out of excuses. The computer tracked these changes down to the minute, so police were able to review when the notes were initially written compared to these suspicious edits. This was inarguable. When confronted about Kathleen, he spoke in complex medical language to sort of assert himself and his intellect to make the investigators feel small. This fully checks out when we're talking about an educated narcissist. If you've experienced one, you know what I'm talking about. Harold felt a threat to himself, so he tried to belittle the investigators to feel in control and bigger than them, rather than just sitting with the truth and allowing that emotion of fear in. It's a defense mechanism, and it just painted him in the most accurate light. Harold Shipman had the audacity to say he had never seen Kathleen, but his prints were all over the will, so how do we explain that? The blood sample that he was supposed to take was never recovered, and no nearby labs had a sample from Kathleen Grundy. He couldn't explain where that was either. The detectives officially let Shipman know that they were charging him with Kathleen Grundy's murder. He had his rights read to him, and he was placed under arrest. In true narcissistic fashion, though, he was shocked because he really thought that he would walk out of there. He refused to speak with the detectives. He turned his chair away and refused to respond any further, which didn't matter at that point. This is how a power-hungry narcissist responds to a loss of control. Before we talk about the victims and Dr. Shipman's background, we have to cover some nursing ground here because I want you all to have a deep understanding of this story. Drop a comment down below and let me know if you like these nursing segments because I love sharing this information. The first thing we have to talk about is morphine. Though there were slightly different variations of this medication used on Harold's victims, the overall medication was morphine or a derivative of it. I'm sure that most of you know this, but morphine is actually a pain medication. It works by blocking the pain signals to the receptors throughout the body, so basically you're kind of tricking your mind out of feeling that pain when you take it. The good thing is it helps you to relax. The bad thing is it slows your breathing down. Because this is a known side effect, medical professionals actually count your breaths just to be sure that it's safe to give the medication, typically before and after administration of it. We do this to make sure that it's effectively treating your pain and to make sure that you're going to continue breathing safely, so it's just a safety measure. I just want to make it known, though, that it is safe to be given this medication at the correct dosage. So I don't want to hear any, "Nurse Cat said I can't take this." No. It is safe, but it does require monitoring. The fact that Dr. Death decided to use this as his method, along with the power and responsibility that comes with being a healthcare provider, is just disgusting. I cannot fathom how it must have felt to have your favorite doctor come into your home and make it seem like he was there to just take labs or prescribe some cold medicine and then look you in the eyes as you slowly stopped breathing, feeling so confused and scared in your final moments. It's just such a violation of trust. Now that we have an understanding of his weapon of choice, we need to talk about what comfort care means. It's oftentimes a type of care for terminally ill patients that are near the end of life. And most people don't know this, but cancer is very uncomfortable, not only because of the intense treatment process, but depending on the location and size, the cancerous growths themselves cause actual pain. In fact, many diseases that have progressed to the point of no return come with a lot of discomfort and pain. I'm sure that many of us here have either seen this with their loved ones or a friend, or maybe even experienced it themselves. I myself am a cancer survivor, so I can actually speak to this as both the patient and the nurse. Comfort care or hospice care is meant to take a more gentle approach with end-of-life care. Usually you have a huge team comprised of nurses, doctors, social workers, therapists, a chaplain, health aides, and so much more, all working together to provide comfort and pain relief. They also help the family during that painful transition into the next phase of life without them. Typically, this care is provided in the patient's home environment, which is where Dr. Shipman took advantage of his victims. I wanted to talk about this because it is repulsive to me, it's my favorite word today, that he had the audacity to enter into someone's safe space, some with little to no health issues whatsoever, and murdered them. He weaponized his knowledge. Our homes are supposed to provide us a safe place to rest and heal, and he egregiously violated that. Dr. Harold Frederick Shipman was born on January 14, 1946, at the Bestwood Estate in Nottingham, UK. He was born into a seemingly normal working-class family with both a present mother and father and siblings. Harold was born during the baby boom era, where he had plenty of opportunity at his fingertips to make almost any dream come true, and becoming a physician is one, and look what he did with that privilege. His mother stayed at home raising the kids while his dad worked driving trucks, but nonetheless, he had two present and loving parents despite his dad being away for short periods of time. Growing up, Harold Shipman was extremely close with his mother, Vera. As a child, his mother reportedly instilled a sense of superiority and accomplishment in all her kids, but especially Harold, really setting the stage for his ego to emerge later on, in my opinion. This picturesque life was interrupted when his mom was diagnosed with lung cancer and it was deemed incurable. This happened during Harold's teen years, which is a very impressionable, pivotal time in life in terms of trauma and mental health development. Shipman was oftentimes present for his mother's doctor's appointments and appeared to become fascinated with his mother's cancer treatments. He paid special attention to the fact that they injected her with morphine to ease the pain that cancer caused her. Harold tried his very best to care for his mother in between the visits, as the oldest child typically does. Her doctor was old school compared to how we have it now and would come to the house to provide her comfort treatments. On a warm summer's day in June of 1963, Harold Shipman came home from school and found his mother Vera dead, resting in her armchair at just 43 years old. Harold was only 17. It is widely believed that this moment was a canon event in Dr. Shipman's life, as there are many instances in which his patients were found in identical circumstances to his mother. Shipman desperately sought his mom's attention and approval, but was also rebuked by her. This tug and pull can create a lot of emotional dysregulation in children and create an unhealthy attachment to that parent. We have an instinct to want to make our parents proud, and Vera dying was traumatic because Harold never got her official approval that he so desperately sought. Is this why he mimicked her loss with his victims? Was it some psychotic void he was trying to fill? Vera often said that Harold would make the Shipman name famous someday, but I don't think she meant for these reasons. Through all of this pain, he fixated on the general practitioner that came to Vera's home visits and thought to himself, I want a little piece of that power. In 1970, Dr. Shipman got his medical degree from Leeds Medical School at Leeds University at just 19 years old. During his college years, he dated a woman named Primrose, and she was actually his landlady's daughter. What was not a part of Harold's plan, though, during this time was getting Primrose pregnant, but he did. Primrose's family was very old-fashioned, and they felt that it was not right to have a child out of wedlock, so they were strongly encouraged to get married. After the wedding, their daughter Sarah was born, and soon afterwards they had a son named Christopher. After medical school, Shipman took a job in West Yorkshire, UK at Pontefract General Infirmary, I hope I said that right, working as a general practitioner. This was in 1974, before he began specializing in his career, and sadly also when the known deaths began. He worked on night shift, as most new grads in both nursing and medicine do, and you come in low on the totem pole and you kind of sort of have to earn your stripes, so it's pretty normal to start out on the night shift. All of the staff there actually reported enjoying working with him and for him. They said that he was helpful, always went the extra mile, and helped everybody. One immediate red flag to me, though, about this is that narcissists are usually very charming. So it stood out to me as a red flag, but that may only be because I know how the story ends. He didn't actually want to help anyone. He wanted to harm people. I'm not sure if anyone here has heard of this, but doctors take what's called a Hippocratic oath, and a portion of that states do no harm. He clearly did not listen to that part. As Dr. Shipman's career progressed, he focused on a few areas, scary: obstetrics, pediatrics, and gynecology. But things took a major turn when in 1975, he was actually caught writing prescriptions for himself and stealing what's called pethidine from the practice. Pethidine is a medication that's similar to morphine in that it's a pain medication, but it's actually been since kind of phased out because there are better, safer options available currently. This was his personal drug of choice. Something that many people don't know, though, is that it's actually not uncommon for people in healthcare to struggle with addiction, especially narcotics. Think about how often medical professionals handle these medications. And just because someone's in uniform does not mean that they don't struggle with addiction behind closed doors too. In nursing school, I actually had a rotation at a methadone clinic. We discussed methadone in our last case, but it's actually a medication that helps you wean off of drugs. One of the nurses explained to me that every walk of life, ranging from homeless to well-known surgeons, had been a patient there. Addiction does not discriminate against anyone. Dr. Shipman would write prescriptions for his patients, then act like a knight in shining armor by offering to fill it for them, and then he would just take it himself. Do you see why so many patients loved him? Upon his boss's discovery of this, it was reported to the authorities, like it should be. Harold was ordered to pay a fine of £600 to the council or court and attend rehab. After rehab, Harold worked at Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde. His prior demeanor of being a hero had drastically changed after this time period. Now Shipman was known to be really arrogant during this phase. He truly pushed the boundaries that he had in the workplace, nearly being caught killing patients by experimenting on dosing the ones that were near death to determine what doses would actually be lethal not only to them, but to others. This makes me sick to my stomach, knowing that he treated the sick as a science experiment to steal the lives of additional people. His colleagues reported that he also enjoyed badgering the pharmaceutical reps to further assert his dominance, very similar to how he spoke to the detectives, if you remember. It's difficult to predict exactly when the mass murdering started, but what we do know is that his killing spree began while working at Donnybrook using morphine. The investigation revealed that Dr. Harold Shipman likely killed 24 patients over the 3 years that he was employed there. In 1977, at only 31 years old, Harold went back to practicing in Hyde, now as a general practitioner, or as we typically call them in the US, a primary care provider. At this point, Shipman established himself as a pillar in the community after working hard to rebuild his reputation after rehab. Many of his former patients stated that he was a GP that truly cared. Dr. Shipman then decided to open up his own practice at 21 Market Street in 1993. This is when his ruthless killing streak rapidly grew. Since it was his own business, he worked alone and with no supervision from anybody. He marketed himself as someone that would care for people from the cradle to the grave, which is highly disturbing, knowing that he's a serial killer. That phrase literally sends chills down my spine. It's estimated that over 200 times he injected lethal doses of morphine and gave a calming pat to his patients as they passed away. He didn't smother them or do anything physical to them, which in my opinion is particularly predatory. He was preying on the vulnerable for over 25 years, using his position of authority as a weapon against an entire town. To destroy evidence, similar to what was said to Angela and Phil, the doctor pushed families to cremate patients and erase his tracks. If anyone questioned him or what he chose to document as the cause of death, he would actually provide his notes to the family to justify their passing, which that's the ultimate form of gaslighting. Imagine showing backdated notes to people just to make them believe your warped version of reality so that they can develop a sense of trust with you, and then they cremate their loved ones, all to protect him and keep the maniacal chain going. The more that he killed, as it's true for most people and most psychopaths, the more bold and ruthless he became. He got a thrill seeing how far he could take it and for how long. I really believe that he thought he never was going to get caught. Something that Dr. Shipman had the audacity to do at times was actually murder more than one person per family. In fact, 2 additional family members of Kathleen Grundy had been murdered by him as well, probably from her own recommendation. The vast majority of Harold Shipman's victims were females, typically over the age of 65 and residing alone. He would go see his victims, then inject them with medication, and then would leave them alone to die. Oftentimes, he would go back to his office and backdate the medical record to falsify the cause of death in order to make it appear that he hadn't even been there, and he would add diseases to justify the reasons that they died. So, what was the reason that Harold did this? Was it financial, power, a God complex? Did he think he was putting them out of their misery or easing their pain? Was it to avenge his mother's death? He murdered because he could. Some didn't even have appointments, and he would swing by to check on them as his regulars to make it seem like he's some chivalrous doctor. Many of his victims were found clothed in a chair, sipping tea in the window, just like his mother. People like Harold Shipman want to be seen as the savior. The dilemma of the why in this case captivated the public, and that's why he was landed the nickname Dr. Death by the British tabloids. By March of 1998, the public began to grow wary of him because it was clear that many of his patients had been dying in strange circumstances, and a lot of them. A doctor by the name of Linda Reynolds worked as a GP across the street from Harold's office, actually. I'm sure that most of you know this, but typically your PCP or GP sign your death certificate, and even if you kind of bounce around and see other providers, it's still usually tasked back to whoever is mainly seeing you. At least that's how it is in the US. Dr. Linda Reynolds had patients that were also seen in home visits by Dr. Shipman, as many others did as well. But she noticed that she began seeing and signing more and more death certificates that were tied to him. She also was receiving cremation documents that required to be countersigned from none other than Dr. Shipman. The doctor found this very peculiar and reported it to the coroner, John Pollard. John agreed that this was not a coincidence, and he then reached out to the police, who decided to look into it further. Although it was looked into, there wasn't enough information at that time to get a warrant. This sadly became a dead end. Had they fully investigated this case, or maybe gotten that warrant somehow, they would have prevented additional deaths, and certainly they would have prevented Kathleen Grundy's death. After Dr. Shipman was arrested, he was charged with 14 additional murders and a count of forgery of the will. We know Kathleen Grundy's story well, since it kind of all started with her and she was the catalyst that got him arrested, but I'm actually going to share now a little bit more about the 14 additional victims that Harold was officially charged with. I do want to just give a little snippet here that I wish I could share everything about all of his victims, but with there being 215 alleged and 15 confirmed, I'm going to focus here on the 15, but I am going to share the names of those that were also alleged at the very end, because they deserve that notoriety as well. In addition to Kathleen Grundy, 81-year-old Marie West was deemed to be another one of Shipman's victims. On March 6, 1995, Harold Shipman injected Mrs. West with a fatal dose of morphine, but he was unaware that her friend Marianne Hadfield was just over in the next room. This was risky for him and strayed from his normal MO, but that's only because he wasn't aware that anyone else was home. Marie's friends stated that they noticed that the visit went from friendly and chatty to complete silence. Then Dr. Shipman told him, "She's collapsed on me, she's gone." Shipman first told Mrs. West's son that Marie had likely died of a stroke, and then later said that it was a heart attack after falsifying the documentation. Mrs. West ran a clothing store in Hyde, a suburb of Manchester. This death was connected to Harold by the medical records later found in his home. 67-year-old Irene Turner was found deceased in her St. Paul's Road Hill house, fully clothed on her bed by her neighbor. It's reported that Irene had a colorful medical history and that she had fallen ill after going on a vacation with her family. Due to this cold, Irene asked Dr. Shipman to come evaluate her on July 11, 1996. To set it up so that someone would find her, Shipman actually asked the neighbor if she could pack Mrs. Turner's belongings to go to the hospital, but told her to wait a few minutes before going over. Morphine was later found in Mrs. Turner's body, and she had no history of ever being on that medication. Irene's son-in-law described her as brilliant and said that she was an adventurous woman. Mrs. Lizzie Adams was a 77-year-old retired sewing machinist who died at home on February 28, 1997. Dr. Shipman stated that she died of pneumonia and pretended to call for an ambulance. Although no such call was made, how sadistic is it to pretend to call for help and provide her with a moment of relief that more help was on the way, only for Shipman to take her life? This was connected once again to Harold by the medical records discovered in his garage. A gentleman named Mr. Catlow was Lizzie's dancing partner for over 17 years, and he was crushed by the loss of Lizzie. 58-year-old Jean Lilly was visited by Dr. Shipman the morning of her death on April 25, 1997. A neighbor became increasingly concerned about the length of time that Dr. Shipman had been with Mrs. Lilly, who was only suffering from a cold. A cold visit should only be brief, maybe 15-30 minutes, so I could imagine why they felt that way. As soon as he left, the neighbor went over to Jean's house to see if she needed anything and found that her friend had passed away. Paramedics later said that Mrs. Lilly had been dead for a while, and upon postmortem examinations, it was found that she was killed by, once again, a lethal dose of morphine. She was the only one of the 15 victims to have been married at the time of her death, but her husband was not home during that time. Shipman contacted her husband by calling his cell phone to let him know that his wife had died, and he said that the cause of death was severe heart problems, but the pathologist stated that she had no evidence of that in her findings. Jean's neighbors said that she was full of zest for life and had been that way as recently as that morning of her visit with Dr. Shipman, proving she was more than healthy prior to his arrival. 81-year-old Kathleen Wagstaff was a unique story to the rest. Mrs. Wagstaff was born in Middlesbrough and was the widow of a retired garage manager. Strangely enough, she was actually confused by Shipman with another patient. Apparently, Dr. Shipman called the wrong house to announce that his patient had died. This took place on December 9th, 1997. Once he realized this, he knew that he needed to find the next of kin and notify them in person to correct this mistake. Harold visited Angela Wagstaff, Kathleen's daughter-in-law, at her workplace to tell her that her mother-in-law had died. After injecting Mrs. Wagstaff with morphine, Shipman put her cause of death down as heart disease. There was no phone record that Kathleen had even called to request an appointment with Dr. Shipman, so this was another one of his nefarious drop-by visits. 49-year-old Bianca Pomfrey, a young German woman, was found dead at her home by her son William on the same day that she had been visited by Dr. Shipman. This took place December 10th, 1997. She was Harold's youngest confirmed victim, though there are also reports of a 34-year-old patient that's highly likely to be one of his victims. Bianca was found deceased in her chair, resting with excessive morphine levels found in her body. So, yet another scenario exactly like his mother. Has anyone here seen Bates Motel? Because to me, that's kind of what this is giving. For his cover-up for Bianca, Harold Shipman claimed that she had complained that morning to him with chest pain on the day of her death. How convenient. He fabricated a false medical history to cover his tracks after killing her. The forensic experts found that in his computer, he had backdated a history of heart disease to support his heart attack claim 1 hour after seeing her. Harold's official cause of death was that Bianca had died of coronary thrombosis and ischemic heart disease. Dr. Shipman's diagnosis of ischemia paired with coronary thrombosis essentially means a heart attack. 65-year-old Nora Nuttall had her life stolen January 26, 1998. She was born and raised in Hyde and was a widow to her sweetheart, John. Nora visited Shipman Surgery Center for cough medicine after coming down with a cold. The doctor later visited Mrs. Nuttall at her home, where her son Anthony found his mother slumped, yet again, in a chair. Dr. Shipman stated that he called an ambulance to reassure her son, but shocker, no record of that call was ever found. Maureen Ward was a 57-year-old former college professor. Although Maureen had a history of breast cancer, she was doing really well and had no complaints at the time that she died on February 18, 1998. She was not ill at the time of her death. In fact, she was actually planning to go on a cruise, according to her friends. Dr. Shipman claimed that her cancer was back and had spread to the brain, abruptly taking her life. The pathologist, as well as her oncologist, both stated that she had been in remission and that the cancer had not come back. To no one's surprise, at this point in the story especially, her actual cause of death was the narcotic injection. Winifred Meller was a 73-year-old widow and a retired nursery nurse who had been Dr. Shipman's patient for 18 years. She was found dead on May 11, 98, in a chair at her home with her left sleeve rolled up to suggest that she had a drug habit following an earlier visit by none other than Dr. Shipman. He killed her with a fatal dose of morphine and then returned to his office to create a false medical history to support that cause of death was likely coronary thrombosis. This seemed to be fabricated because the community actually reported that Winifred would frequently go on 2-hour walks and was extremely active. Similar to his other victims, Dr. Shipman falsified her medical record to show that she had actually also complained of chest pains, and this is what she passed away from. Joan Melia was a 73-year-old retired post office supervisor that Shipman murdered during a visit to her home in Hyde on June 12, 1998. She was found dead by a neighbor in her living room after having a visit with Dr. Shipman at his office about a chest infection. Shipman issued a death certificate stating that she had actually died from pneumonia and emphysema, which is a chronic lung illness, if you didn't know. After this finding, her body was exhumed and was found to contain morphine, but no signs of lung disease or acute lung processes showed. The GP also claimed to have called an ambulance, but of course he didn't. There was no record of it. 63-year-old Ivy Lomas was killed by Shipman at his surgery center on May 29th of 97 on Market Street in Hyde. She was a widow to her late husband, who worked as an engineer. He injected Ivy during their appointment, then proceeded to act like nothing had happened and saw 3 more patients before telling his receptionist that he had failed to resuscitate Ivy. Friends, why do we think that is? I personally believe that the reason that he delayed telling anyone is because there may have been a chance that she could have been resuscitated if he told them sooner, and he didn't want that. If Ivy had recovered from this, she may have been able to tell the authorities what Dr. Shipman had done. So, he manipulatively bought himself time to prevent her from being saved. Talk about do no harm. Similar to his other victims, morphine was later found in her body. Ivy was a regular at Dr. Shipman's office, and he actually told a police sergeant who was called after her death that he thought that she was a nuisance. He joked that part of the seating area should be reserved for her and a plaque should be put up in her place in the waiting area. I personally do not find him funny. 76-year-old Mariel Grimshaw was found dead in her home on July 14th of 97. Mariel was found by her daughter, Anne Brown, and this came as a total shock. Dr. Shipman told Anne that her mother had died from a stroke and hypertension. Shipman, who was called to examine her, said that there was no need for a postmortem, and once again, morphine was later found in her body. The pathologist stated that she had high levels of morphine in her body. 67-year-old Marie Quinn spent her time working as a food process worker and also participated in the Women's Royal Voluntary Service. Sadly, she was murdered by Dr. Shipman via an injection of morphine at her home on November 24, 1997. Shipman claimed that Marie had contacted him, complaining that she hadn't been feeling well prior to her death, which he told her son clearly meant that she had had a stroke. Convenient that that was always his go-to. Dr. Shipman stated that when he arrived, Marie had already passed away, but her phone records actually showed that she never even contacted Dr. Shipman to come by. So this means that this is yet another one of his lethal stop-by check-ins. 68-year-old Pamela Hillier was a very active and healthy woman. She had a career working as a secretary to her late husband, who was a financial advisor. It's actually said in an article published by the BBC that Pamela was literally removing her own wallpaper just a week prior to her death. That's how much energy she had. Shipman gave Pamela's family a very confusing, disjointed account of how she had actually died on February 9th of 1998. He stated that she had high blood pressure, but that it wasn't high enough to give him major concerns, although she died from high blood pressure. Then he threw out the idea of one of his favorite cover-ups, a stroke. To nobody's surprise, he had in fact given her a lethal dose of morphine. Trial began in Preston Crown Court on the 5th of October in 1999. Just as a reminder, Harold Shipman was charged with the 15 counts of murder and 1 of forgery for Kathleen's will. All of this took place between 1995 and 1998. Phil, Kathleen Grundy's son-in-law, said that he came off very arrogant during the trial. Sir Richard Enriquez was the lead prosecutor, and it's reported that he was strong with his cross-examination skills, and he's one of the only people to have ever made Dr. Shipman squirm, and he did so on the stand, oftentimes with him providing nonsensical responses back to him. That's a huge shift compared to how Shipman usually speaks to people. In September of 2000, Judge Danae Janet Smith led the inquiry into all of Shipman's prior patients and potential victims. The evidence of all his charts was far too much to review during that trial. The judge ordered a committee to review 270,000 pages of evidence, and the potential crimes were rapidly mounting. This is called the Shipman Inquiry. More to come on that here in a couple minutes. After 5 days of jury deliberation, on January 31st, 2000, the jury found Dr. Harold Shipman, aka Dr. Death, guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to 15 life terms in prison plus 4 more years for the forgery of Kathleen Grundy's will. Despite overwhelming evidence, Dr. Harold Shipman maintained his innocence, as did his wife, Primrose. I'm sorry, but I can't get behind that. All of this was shocking, but this part really made me mad. On January 13th, 2004, Shipman performed his final kill. He took his own life 1 day before his birthday. He used a bed sheet in his cell and Epsteined himself, if you know what I mean, after only serving a little over 5 years total in jail from the time of his arrest to then. I want to add a quote from Mr. Catlow, Lizzie's dance partner, because he articulated my feelings on this perfectly. Quote, "He was an arrogant man, and this final piece of arrogance is displayed here. He has gone to his grave without ever telling us why," end quote. Although he was convicted of 15 murders, based on the inquiry findings, it's actually believed to be closer to 215 to 300 patients that had their lives heinously stolen by him. So many patients were cremated per his own guidance, so there could be countless more that will never be confirmed. In July of 2002, the inquiry found that Dr. Shipman officially was held responsible for the 250 to 60 murders over 25 years, which was way more than 15. I'm sure there are so many more, and I'm so angry that he took his own life and provided nobody closure or the answers that they deserved. The inquiry also revealed that there were actually a few male victims too, which was a total shock because it went against his typical MO. He chose to take his secrets with him to the grave on 1/13/2004, the day before his 58th birthday. He never once apologized to anyone for what he did. The final Shipman report was published in 2005, and you can actually look it up online, but I will also link it down below just in case you want to take a look at it. In this report, it was discovered that Eva Lyons was Shipman's first ever known victim. She was killed the day before her 71st birthday in March of 1975 while he was working at the Abraham Medical Practice in Todmorden. I hope I said that right, in West Yorkshire. Another 71 patients were murdered during this time working at the Donnybrook House in Hyde. The remaining 143 were murdered after 1992 when Shipman became a solo GP working on Market Street in Hyde, and this was all discovered several years after he took his own life. The amount of anger that I feel towards this pathetic human being is indescribable. For those of us with a soul, we go into the medical field because we have the desire to help people and to heal them. This spineless, soulless monster saw an opportunity to fulfill some sick, twisted fantasy and God complex to relieve him of the pain of his own mother's passing. I don't even know what to say because it's truly unimaginable and it's just horrifying to me. He was trusted with over 3,000 people's lives, and he ran rampant for over 25 years. It terrifies me to know how many people he took from this world that we're never even going to know about. All that I can say is I hope he rots forever and ever wherever he is. I'm going to share the list of names that were also found in the inquiry to be his victims, despite him not being formally charged with them, because they deserve that acknowledgement as well. If you all hung on to the very, very end, comment a butterfly emoji down below, because that's my favorite, as our secret handshake, so I know you made it here. Thank you all from the very bottom of my heart for being here with me. Please be sure to comment any suggestions that you have down below, and I will be sure to take a look into them. Please take extra good care of yourselves, you guys. I know times are tough right now. Nurses' orders. See you next week. Bye.